Greetings to you, music lovers, thrill seekers, and smut engagers all across the fruited plain. Rush Limbaugh here behind the golden EIB microphone with apologies in advance for where the left and the Democrats are taking the content of this program. Right smack dab into smut central. Right smack dab into the filthiest, grimiest gutter you can find and whatever is beneath it. On today's program, we will learn what a vagina ghetto is, as written about in a... Yes, a vagina ghetto. We will learn about this as written about by an op-ed writer in the New York Times. I mean, when you hear that term, what do you first think of when you hear vagina ghetto? Well, it may be what you're thinking. We'll let you know when we get there. Did I say or not say that Christine Ballsy Ford would not testify tomorrow? Right, and you continued to think that was crazy because at some point she has to testify. To which point I said, no, she never has to testify because all of this is about stringing it out. Well, the latest and the reason why, and again, I apologize, my friends, but we have to go there. The lawyer for the porn star, Stormy Daniels, who's sued against Trump, may be thrown out of court in Los Angeles, has now produced a woman who claims that at parties, back when Kavanaugh was in high school, women were drugged and given grain alcohol in the punch so as to set up rape trains. The woman has been identified by name and by photograph. Her name is Julie Swetnick, and Avenatti announced all of this on The View this morning. Two sound bites. Here is co-host Sonny Hostin asking, did Kavanaugh do anything to this particular woman, Julie Swetnick, or is she alleging she just had seen him be aggressive with other women?
The allegations, if you read further in the declaration, are far more specific relating to Brett Kavanaugh's conduct towards women in general, including the attempts to drug women by placing grain alcohol and or drugs in basically the punch at these parties. Many of these women ended up gang raped, unfortunately. The details in this declaration are specific. They are shocking, but above all else, they are true. And my client stands behind them 100%, and she's looking forward to having an opportunity to meet with one or more FBI agents, hopefully, and describe what happened. And she's also prepared to testify, if she's permitted to do so, to the U.S. Senate. But under no circumstances should Brett Kavanaugh be confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court until these allegations and others are fully vetted and all of the facts and the truth are known.
The next question is from Abby Huntsman, co-hostess on The View. Can you just explain, Avenatti, can you just explain again to our viewers and to all of us, since this is just breaking, what specifically did Judge Kavanaugh do to your client?
I'm going to stand on the exact language in the declaration. It's laid out in detail in the declaration. There's a reason why it's laid out in the declaration, and we're not going to provide any additional comment on that exact question until the coming days.
So, in this allegation, yet again, this particular woman, Julie Swetnick, is not accusing Kavanaugh of doing anything to her. She is interpreting the minds of other women at a Haskell party. And what does became aware he spiked drinks even mean? It means that she didn't witness it. She became aware. It means somebody told her. When did somebody tell her? Monday? Last week? You've heard the story going around now that there are affidavits from 4 people, one of whom is the husband of Ballsy Ford. You've heard that there are 4 affidavits corroborating her story. No, they don't corroborate her story. They corroborate that she told them the story. They don't. There is no corroboration. This would be akin, ladies and gentlemen, to me coming on this program today and saying that I overheard Barack Obama admit that he ordered the FBI to spy on Trump. I can't remember when or where. And now you can corroborate it for me. I've just told you that I overheard Obama admit he ordered the FBI to spy on Trump, and you can corroborate that because you heard me say it. But you can't corroborate that Obama told the FBI to spy on Trump. And this is the trick that is being played here. At what we're learning, if there was ever any doubt, this third accuser coming forth today on the eve of Ballsy Ford supposedly testifying tomorrow, there is no lower limit. There is nothing too ludicrous. There's nothing too disgusting. There's nothing too putrid. There's nothing too perverted that the Democrats will not do to try to smear a person they want to destroy simply because they cannot stand somebody other than one of theirs being on the United States Supreme Court. We shouldn't be surprised. Hillary Clinton claims that Trump hired prostitutes to urinate on hotel bed that the Obamas supposedly slept on, and we got an FBI warrant, a FISA warrant, to spy on Trump based on that allegation in the dossier. This has gotten so crazy. Do you remember when it was first looking like Christine Ballsy Ford was going to show up and testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee? What did the left say? The left said, you can't have a bunch of Republican old white guys question her. You can't have that. Oh, that would be horrible. We're not going to allow it. We're not going to allow old white senators to question her. So Senator Grassley heard that, got the message, and went out and hired a female prosecutor, specializes in these kinds of sexual abuse cases, and she's going to come in and she's going to ask the questions tomorrow. The Democrats say, you can't do that. You can't bring somebody who has nothing to do with the committee in to ask these questions. The senators ought to be asking the questions. Wait, you just said the senators should not be. And then Grassley goes out and gets a woman who specializes in this from New Mexico, Arizona, wherever, to come in and do it. Now you say she shouldn't do it, that the senators should. And it's in that back and forth that the term vagina ghetto appears in a New York Times. New York Times. We're not talking here about supermarket tabloids. We're talking about New York Times, and it's a lawyer or some person specializing in the abuse of women who has coined the term. So here are details. I have a Bloomberg version of the story, but they're the Wall Street Journal and others. A new accuser against Brett Kavanaugh said that he took part in efforts during high school to get girls intoxicated so that a group of boys could have sex with them. Washington resident Julie Swetnick, in a sworn affidavit released by the porn star attorney Michael Avenatti, said, I have a firm recollection of seeing boys lined up outside rooms at many of these parties waiting for their turn with a girl inside the room. These boys that I remember seeing lined up outside included Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh. And Avenatti released a picture of his client, Julie Swetnick, with the description that she is courageous, brave, and honest. We ask that her privacy and that of her family be respected after Avenatti plasts her photo all over the place. Swetnick said that she was a victim of one of those incidents in the early 1980s and that Kavanaugh and Judge had been present, though she did not say whether they had sex with her. In other instances, she said in the affidavit, Kavanaugh and Judge made efforts to cause girls to become inebriated and disoriented so they could then be gang raped in a side room or bedroom by a train of numerous boys. The allegation comes one day before Kavanaugh is set to testify again at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, along with another accuser, Christine Ballsy Ford, who said, does anybody still think that this thing is going to happen tomorrow? You know, I'm getting close to revising something, folks. The audio soundbite roster today, and Cookie gave me a warning. She said, I know you don't like it when the show becomes about you, but of course, Rush, everything is always about you. And she's got soundbite after soundbite after soundbite of Sky News, the BBC, Swahili News, all over the world. They're playing that soundbite of me claiming the Republicans will lose everything if they don't confirm Kavanaugh. They're playing it all over the place. She's given me a lot of new examples of it. You've heard the bite. I mentioned, you probably heard me state it originally. With this latest revelation, you know, I don't use the word scum very often at all. Back in my early formative broadcasting days, I got great advice from people who cared about my future and career, and there were various advice things I was told. Don't say things you don't believe just to get a rise out of people. Don't ever do that. Don't just be outrageous for the sake of it. He said, by the way, you don't have to try to be outrageous. You come by it naturally. So don't try. Just don't make things up that you don't believe. And be very careful of the guttural words, descriptive words that you use to describe it. Scum was one of the words that you'd be very careful how you throw that word around. It's just 4 letters, but it hits people in a very, very bad way, and you just don't let that ever become part of your vocabulary, and it hasn't. But I don't know how else to describe what this is. This is just the scum, the literal scum of the American left that is rising to their surface. And there isn't a single guilty conscience anywhere in the Democrat Party today that we know of, or anywhere on the left, for any of this that is being done. We have a Senate confirmation hearing that is being looked at as a trial. In the early days of this country, and for many, many years after the founding of this country, do you know that the advise and consent role of the Senate was done by affidavit? The nominees to positions on various courts never showed up. The Senate did not conduct hearings and examinations and this. They just submitted affidavits. The nominees, because the purpose of the advise and consent was to determine the fitness and the qualification of whoever the president had appointed. Well, that's long ago gone by the wayside. That's not what this is now, as anybody can tell. And I may be having to rethink my belief that Kavanaugh not being confirmed would cause Republicans to not show up. I don't think Republicans would ever vote Democrat. Somebody said, Rush is crazy. Republicans aren't going to vote Democrat. I never said that. I said they won't show up. They won't vote Republican if Kavanaugh doesn't get confirmed. But now with this, I think the level of disgust and anger at Washington on the part of average, ordinary, decent Americans is near a boiling point. And once they hear about this latest allegation, now this guy Kavanaugh was rape trains and getting women drunk. It doesn't pass any smell test or believability test. The Democrats have just reached the absolute bottom of whatever pit they live in. And here's the thing. All of this, I firmly believe, has been planned. I think it's a previously conceived plan that they are in the process now of, in their minds, flawlessly executing. I think they've got various things waiting for various other stages to happen. And when it looks like all is lost and Kavanaugh's going to be confirmed, there they go to the dregs of what they've got and bring it all out. I haven't heard it yet, but it can't be long now that somebody's going to say, well, we can't have this hearing tomorrow, not with this latest allegation. And, of course, the Democrats, and they're thinking this woman is obviously cannot be challenged. She's the accuser. It's the Me Too movement. Whatever she says, it has to be accepted because we believe the victims. We think women don't lie in these circumstances. And so there'll be a new demand for an FBI investigation and so forth. In the meantime, it's going to get lost on people that Avenatti is not, nor his client, they are not suggesting Kavanaugh did anything. At best, this stuff happened and Kavanaugh and his buddy Judge were there and hanging around. But this is the first that anybody has heard of rape trains, the rape drug, and getting girls in high school drunk so as to create rape trains. That just hit this week with Avenatti alluding to the fact that he had a client that was going to say so. Take a brief time out. We will continue. The Kavanaugh lawyer, by the way, Beth Wilkinson, and the Christine Ballsy Ford legal team sent over some documents here that part of the process. And Kavanaugh's lawyer says that they didn't send the lie detector test or the therapist notes. Yeah, now imagine that. The attorney for Kavanaugh says that the notes taken during therapy sessions with Kavanaugh's accuser, as well as results from a lie detector test, have not yet been turned over ahead of tomorrow's hearing. Beth Wilkinson was on CBS this morning today. She said that information would be very important to corroborate claims that the nominee sexually assaulted Ford in high school. We can't see the lie detector results? No, we're never going to see those, folks. Wilkinson said they announced that there were notes and that there had been a lie detector test, but as I understand it, they didn't turn any of those over to the Senate committee, even though they were requested. So the information that would have shown what she said at the very first time as she revealed these allegations has not been turned over to the Senate. There's no way we can corroborate this independently. But 4 people have corroborated her story. No, they haven't. 4 people have not corroborated her story. They have corroborated that she told them the story after Mitt Romney leaked that he was thinking of naming Kavanaugh to the court if Romney had won in 2012. The one thing I think it's probably safe to say is that the Democrats knew they were losing. Ballsy Ford had bombed out. That didn't pan out the way they want. And in the Ramirez stories, they weren't moving the needle because both were designed to make Kavanaugh cave or Trump cave. Trump pull a nomination, Kavanaugh to stay to hell with this. That didn't happen. So I think this is the Hail Mary. Avenatti with this babe and the rape trains is the Hail Mary. And it remains to be seen that people are going to start saying, I don't know how he can continue with all of this hanging over his head, even if he ends up being exonerated, even if he makes it to the court. For crying out loud, this stuff is never going to be forgotten. They're flooding the zone for precisely that reason. They are trying to destroy and sully a reputation for the rest of Kavanaugh's life here. And again, decent people don't quite know how to deal with this, much less refute it, other than to say it's bogus. Back in a second. I'll tell you something else. I'll tell you how smooth the operation was to blindside the Republicans today. On Monday, we got the story that Avenatti, the porn star attorney, had this babe that knew of rape trains in Kavanaugh's high school. Women were drugged and given adult beverages in massive quantities. And this set up rape trains for guys to go in and out of rooms where these drunk and drugged women had been placed on beds. And then shortly after that, there began to be on various odd places on the internet, like 4chan and other places, that Avenatti had all of a sudden locked his Twitter account, and then Avenatti was pulling back on it. And everybody said, see, he doesn't have anything. He doesn't have diddly squat. He tried, and he launched a blank. And then this morning, here comes Avenatti on the eve of Ballsy Ford's testimony. And Kavanaugh, here comes Avenatti, and he's got a babe, and he's got a picture. He's got a name. She doesn't name Kavanaugh specifically, but he was in the surrounding vicinity, lurking around doing whatever. And she is willing, 100% willing, to show up and answer anybody's questions about it. And so the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee, I don't know who else in the Republican side of things, probably a lot of people, end up being blindsided today. So blindsided, I'm watching TV during the break, and people still talking about this hearing tomorrow, even after they've reported the Avenatti story today. I should say the Julie Swetnick story. They're still talking about this hearing tomorrow as though nothing has happened. I think people haven't yet, it hasn't hit people yet what this is. It will in due course. The name of this game is delay, delay, delay. Make sure there isn't a vote. If they have to destroy Kavanaugh and his family and his career and his reputation and his life, well, so be it. That's what he deserves for being a conservative and trying to get on a court. That's what they tried to do to Trump, and they're still trying to do to Trump. But Trump fights back on him every day, keeps pushing him back and beating them. But that's what they try to do to every one of us that attempts to encroach on what they consider theirs by virtue of entitlement. And what they consider theirs by virtue of entitlement is a pretty broad swath. It's power in Washington. They think it's theirs, and anybody seeking to take it is going to be destroyed under the premise that you are not even valid to be here. You do not have standing to even be among us, much less take our power. And if you so much as try, we're going to show you how little you matter to anybody anywhere. If we have to destroy you and make your little girls cry, if we have to destroy their future and make sure they can never go anywhere without being pointed at by people accusing their dad of being a train rape setter-upper, then that's what we're going to do. And that's what they're doing. They are shameless and without conscience. And I haven't yet met the decent people know how to deal with this and to beat it back. The only exception is Donaldus J. Trump, who pushes back in his own way and frustrates, doing it today at the UN. Trump is just wiping the floor with people at the UN today. He's wiping the floor with the Iranians. He's wiping the floor with the little Trudeau guy up in Canada. He's wiping the floor with the macaroni guy in France. He is letting it be known that the economic wave sweeping across the globe today starts in the United States, is maintained in the United States, and will continue to spread and grow from the United States. Trump today also announced he was chairing the Security Council meeting. It was his turn. It's the United States' turn. So Trump chairs the meeting. You know how the deep state was panicking over this? Conservative, never Trump. You mean we're going to have this guy up there chairing a meeting at the UN of the Security Council? They were, they thought Trump would start throwing his shoe through glass windows and stuff. Trump pretty much led off by saying the Chi-Coms are trying to interfere in the 2018 elections. The Chi-Coms are trying to destroy Republican chances, and Trump said, you know why? Because I'm wiping the floor with them in trade deals. The Chi-Coms are very unhappy at the success of my administration and the success of the U.S. economy. So now Trump has thrown a wrench into the gear. Usually it's he being accused of collaborating with the Russians over 2016. Now Trump says the Chi-Coms are trying to steal the 2018 elections away from the Republicans. So while all this is going on, Trump is literally making tracks at the United Nations. But the only thing the drive-bys have been able to say about that is that they laughed at Trump when he talked about how his administration has done more good in 2 years than any other administration in the history of the planet. Well, they're lying to you about when the attendees or the audience started laughing. There were some chuckles, just a few chuckles when Trump made the comment that he's done more in 2 years than most administrations have done ever. And there were some chuckles, and Trump said, well, that's not quite the reaction I was looking for. That's what got the big laughter. Not Trump's claim, but his reaction to the initial little wave of chuckles. And that's it. That's all the drive-bys have. The drive-bys, other than that, are ignoring Trump at the United Nations. They are ignoring economic data. They are ignoring everything going on that Trump is touching other than Kavanaugh, because there's nothing they can do to destroy it. There's nothing they can do to take it down. And I don't think they even want to try to convince people. So all they've got is to continue to portray Trump as they always have been, that he's a boob and a dunce and doesn't know what he's doing, and the world is laughing at him. But don't doubt me, the world is not laughing at Donald Trump. The Iranians are not laughing at Donald Trump. The Chicons are not laughing at Donald Trump. Vladimir Putin, shirtless on the horse wherever he is, he's not laughing at Donald Trump. A little pot-bellied dictator in North Korea, Kim Jong-un, is not laughing at Donald Trump. But the never-Trumpers in conservative media circles in the United States are continuing to try to laugh and act mock, shocked, and afraid. So we are at a stage where there is another allegation. There is no evidence. There's no corroboration of evidence. There is, in fact, the Christine Ford legal team refuses to send over the lie detector results or the notes that the therapist took in her meeting in 2012. And get this. This is from the Washington. Yeah, Snurdly, be patient. I'm going to get to the vagina ghetto here in just a second. Washington Post, Ian Shapira. Christine Ballsy Ford's family has been nearly silent amid outpouring of support. The letters appeared within days of Christine Ballsy Ford's name becoming public. One was from her high school classmates. One was from her colleagues at Stanford. Her Palo Alto neighbors wrote another letter. Groups of attorneys, statisticians, and teenagers wrote too. And then came a letter that began, as members of the Christine Ballsy Ford family, and it was signed by a dozen people, but none of them were related to Ford by name or by blood. The letter was from the relatives of her husband, Russell Ford. Christine's own parents and her siblings, the Ballsys, have not released any similar statement of support. As their daughter and sister has become the country's most talked about woman for accusing Kavanaugh of sexual assault while both were in high school, the Ballsys have strategically avoided the media. Voicemails, texts, emails, and letters from reporters have gone unanswered. Friends of the family have politely declined to comment on what they are going through. The Ballsy family's reticence is notable amid the outpouring of support for Ford as the 51-year-old research psychologist from California prepares to testify Thursday. Her family has not sent in or signed letters of support. What does this mean? Does it mean anything? What does it mean, then? If you think it means so, what does it mean? Tell me what it means. I mean, they know her better than anybody else. You saying that they're refusing to sign because they may not think that she's... So her family and her siblings know her better than anybody else, and from that we can conclude, and then we can have it corroborated, that her family is reticent, uneasy, nervous about becoming signatories to the I know it happened and I know it happened to her letter. Okay, Laura Bazelon or Bazelon, don't know how to pronounce this, op-ed writer, New York Times, man up, Grassley, question Ballsy Ford yourself. This is the the convoluted aspect of this, when this first came up, when the hearing was first discussed, the left immediately said, you old white guys, you old white Republicans, you can't question her. She'd be nervous enough. You can't. We're not going to let happen to her what happened to Anita Hill. You can't question. So Grassley said, okay, we are going to be fair. So Grassley goes out and hires a female prosecutor with experience in sexual abuse and sex crime cases. And now comes this woman, Laura Bazelon, said, well, you can't do that. You can't bring in a woman to answer these questions from outside the Senate. You need to have the senators do it. Grassley scratching his head said, wait a minute, you said, and then you said, and... So this woman writes, Dr. Ballsy and her lawyers have pushed back, demanding that Mr. Grassley and his colleagues question her themselves. They are right to do so. The Republican attempts to outsource the questioning of Dr. Ballsy is cynical, sexist, and cowardly. They don't want to be seen grilling Dr. Ballsy in front of tens of millions of Americans. We've watched that horror movie before. Anita Hill, 1991, presided over by Democrats. No one seems anxious for a sequel. This is the written word of this Laura Bazelon babe. But the solution isn't to remove men from the script. It's to ask that these men, these old white guy Republicans, embody different characters. Become people who can pose respectful, probing questions rather than bullies intent on shaming and demeaning the witness. We reserve that right to do that to Kavanaugh. The Democrats on the committee will shame and demean and bully Kavanaugh, but you can't shame, demean, and bully Ballsy. We're not going to permit it. Whether it was female prosecutors clustered in rape and child abuse units or suddenly becoming very in demand when it came time to cross-examine plaintiffs, the consensus was that it takes a woman to know a woman. Again and again, women are told that these are their only real opportunities in courtrooms and now apparently Senate hearings. By the way, this woman writes about the unfairness of women litigators, women lawyers in court. That's her expertise, her level of expertise. She writes about the abuse and the unfairness and the impossible mountain to climb that women lawyers have. Again and again, women are told that these are their only real opportunities in courtrooms, and now apparently Senate hearings. What looks like an invitation for advancement may actually be enclosure in what I call the vagina ghetto, a restricted space outside of which women are not welcome. We need to stop reinforcing this tired trope. If it still doesn't make sense to you what the vagina ghetto is, be patient. I'll take a stab at defining it when we get back, and we'll also get started on the phones. Judge Kavanaugh has issued a statement in response to Julie Swetnick and the porn star lawyer, Michael Avenatti. Quote, this is ridiculous. And from the Twilight Zone, I don't know who this is. Julie Swetnick, I don't know who this is. It never happened. It's ridiculous. It's from the Twilight Zone. Now, I mentioned moments ago that I may be on the verge of revising my prediction. The prediction, and it was very precise. If the Republicans don't confirm Kavanaugh, that there's going to be hell to pay and they could end up losing the Senate and the House because Republican voters would simply say, what's the point? But now I may have to revise this because this latest pop-up, Julie Swetnick, put in combination with Ballsy, Ford, and Ramirez and the way the Democrats are acting, I'm beginning to think now that this is going to create one of the biggest backlashes against Washington and specifically the Democrat. If Kavanaugh is not confirmed, my first prediction was predicated on the Republicans caving and refusing to defend and fight for Kavanaugh. That was my first prediction, was based on that. And if that were the perception, if Republican voters think that the Republicans didn't try and caved to Democrats or the media, even worse, then they would have trouble in the midterms. But this changes that. or has the potential to change this. Because now this takes it out of the hands of the Republicans. This is a tsunami, and it is out of the twilight zone. And most Republicans are going to sit out there and say, well, they themselves are not going to have suggested strategies to push this back. This is just the anger at this, I think, is going to dwarf whatever anger might have happened. If I'm talking about if this latest woman hadn't shown up and if the Republicans caved and didn't really try to push back. But this now, it could change that thinking. You're frowning at me when you look at this. Are you disagreeing with my... Well, it will screw these people up. They've been playing this soundbite of me for the past 3 days. Now they'll have to revise it. Rush Limbaugh's changed. Well, we've got a new player in this. This is pure. I mean, this is the bottom of the gutter scum. We don't have any direct testimony about Kavanaugh doing it in approximately 1982. Approximately? Ballsy Ford can't even place the year, and now Swetnick can't define specifically the year. And just that she was told that Kavanaugh was hanging around when he's rape trained. But in 6 FBI exams and everything leading up to this, no evidence of rape trains was produced by anybody ever. Anyway, I have to take a break because I've intended to take phones here, but I didn't get to it. Sorry. Okay, so we've got these women in a room here. They've been drugged and boozed up, and there's a line of guys waiting for their turn out there. We're talking about gang rape with a bunch of guys waiting in line. Does that make any sense? Does any of this make any sense? None of it. Did anybody call the cops at all of these? Greetings to you. Welcome back. It's great to have you, Rush Limbaugh and the Excellence in Broadcasting Network. Telephone number is 800-282-2882, and if you want to send an email, lrushbo@eibnet.us. Okay, folks, I think it's going to be very easily established at some point that this new babe, Julie Swetnick, has ties to Democrat social justice warriorism or Democrat activism or somewhere down the line. I don't think they want any of this corroborated. Grab audio soundbite number 27. Senator Grassley, the chairman of the committee, spoke to reporters outside the committee room today, or outside his office, and a female reporter said, "Can you respond to these latest allegations that are popping up? We know that your committee has been contacted by Julie Swetnick."
Obviously, with this one, we have a contact, and our lawyers are on it right now, our staff investigators, and I won't have anything because I can't say anything until they get done.
They're turning this thing into an absolute abomination of an embarrassment. Anybody comes forward with something that there's no evidence of, no corroboration, no nothing at the last minute, and they're going to be off and investigating it. They're going to be able to finish their investigation in time for the hearing tomorrow. They don't want any corroboration for this story because there won't be any. The affidavit presented by Avenatti, and Avenatti is saying, I'm not speaking beyond the affidavit. You can ask me whatever you want, but I'm not answering. It's all there. It's all in the affidavit. I'm not answering any other questions about it. Well, guess what's not in the affidavit? No names. No names of anybody else at these parties. No names of victims. We don't have the name of one victim who was, quote unquote, gang raped. We don't have the names of the gang rapists. And it's important to point out that Kavanaugh is not being alleged to be a gang rapist. He is said to have been nearby. In the vicinity, and may have participated in the drugging of the women. But they don't want any of this corroborated. That's what this means, with nothing specific, with no names, with no specific dates. There were supposedly 10 of these parties in 1 year. This accuser, the latest one, Julie Swetnick, says that gang rape was commonplace at parties. Really? Why would she go back? Why did nobody call the cops? If the guys doing the gang rape are waiting politely in line for their turn, were they passing out numbers? I mean, none of this makes any sense. It doesn't pass any kind of test. Because it had to be happening at parents' houses, and either the parents were there and were in on it, or were not there and nobody told them about it, or did tell them and they didn't care. But those are all valid questions, too. 10 of them. The latest accuser says that these gang rape parties were commonplace, and that Kavanaugh and his friends would regularly drug women and violently assault them. But she doesn't specifically say Kavanaugh did that, just that he was there. She alone went to 10 of these parties in 1 year. Why would you keep going to these things? Particularly if you're not one of the drugged and liquored up women. If you're there and you know what's happening upstairs, if you know that a bunch of women have been drugged and prepared for gang rep upstairs and you're downstairs, you just go to the party and you hang out and you don't care any of this is going on upstairs or downstairs, wherever it was. But the fact that there are no names, the fact that there are no specifics tells me they don't want this corroborated. They don't want investigators to be able to find anything. They want to leave it at the seriousness of the charge, and they want to avoid the nature of the evidence. This is the same strategy with slight alterations that they used in suckering in poor old George Papadopoulos. They would tell Papadopoulos, FBI spies would tell Papadopoulos that the Russians had Hillary Clinton emails. Well, Papadopoulos, a young guy on the periphery of the Trump campaign, thinks he's an insider now. Man, they like him. They trust him. They're telling him this inside dope. So he starts telling other people because he wants to be seen as an insider. So he starts telling people. So he goes to a bar with the ambassador from Australia. Hey, you know the Russians. We find out. I'm in a Trump campaign. We know the Russians have a bunch of Hillary's emails. Well, he only knows that because the FBI told him. Australian ambassador calls the FBI. Hey, I got a guy here saying that he knows he's in the Trump campaign. He knows that the Russians have Hillary's emails. The FBI says, what? Well, we better go get a FISA warrant. They plant it. They make sure it circulates, comes back to them, then they go to the judge and say, and then the media gets wind of it and starts running it, and they get a warrant spy. That's what this is. Somebody 12 years, 35 years after the fact says, okay, you know what this happened? Yeah, I know about it. I'll sign a corroborating statement that she told me that it happened. So you get a bunch of people say, yeah, I heard about it. Were you there? No, I wasn't there. You know where it happened? No, I'm just telling you she told me. She told me, and I can corroborate that she told me. Oh, you can't corroborate what she told you. I mean, you don't know that it actually happened. You're just corroborating that she told you the story. Yeah, I can corroborate that. So, folks, Snerdley could have come in here to me today and say that he overheard, while he was in Washington 2 weeks ago, Barack Obama admit that he ordered the FBI to spy on Trump. And when he told me that, I could corroborate it. I could come to you and say, Snerdley told me that Obama ordered the FBI to spy on Trump. I'm a corroborating witness. Not to the fact that Obama did that, but to the fact that Snerdley told me. This is the scam that they're running, among many other things. Now, here's another thing. The trickle is starting from conservative media. Kavanaugh has got to pull out. Kavanaugh has got to withdraw. He cannot continue with this deluge. He just cannot continue. He cannot, because he will not be able to ever get out from underneath this cloud no matter what. We do not, say our conservative brethren in the never-Trump community, we do not want a great justice on the court forever clouded by these allegations where we're going to be always questioning every decision that he writes. And that's why we lose. We got people that want to cave and get. That's not how you deal with this stuff. Decent people are forever going to be treated indecently if they stand aside and allow it. I don't know where Kavanaugh's head is. My guess is that Kavanaugh no more wants to walk away from this than Clarence Thomas wanted to walk away from Anita Hill. Kavanaugh has put everything he's got into this. His latest state. Oh, this is another thing. There are people running around. I saw it on TV earlier today. I don't know about Kavanaugh. He's starting to equivocate. Well, that perked my ears up. When did Kavanaugh equivocate? And this person on TV said, yeah, he said, well, I'm not perfect. He didn't say that today. When I start looking for that, he said that on Fox News earlier this week in the midst of an interview. It wasn't about this. It wasn't in response to this specific allegation. And yet there are people running around today saying, this is not a very strong response to say that I'm not perfect. Hey, that's not how he didn't say it. He called it the Twilight Zone. He said he doesn't know this woman. This is absurd. It's ridiculous. None of this ever happened. They can't prove it. All they can do is find Democrat activists to conjure up stories and go to willing accomplices. And another thing. Do you remember the call we had yesterday from somebody who went to Yale with Kavanaugh? She was calling from Wyoming. She was in a residential college with Kavanaugh. She told us on this program yesterday that reporters from the Huffington and Puffington Post and other drive-by outlets were hounding her throughout the summer for data, for information, tell-all on Kavanaugh. From the summer. From the summer, the media has been chasing down, tracking down anybody and everybody that might have gone to school with Kavanaugh. And they're calling them up, and they're interviewing them, in some cases browbeating them. And this caller yesterday said they're clearly looking for certain angles, and I didn't provide it to them, and they got irritated and ended up ending the conversation. Do you remember the caller's first name? Doesn't matter, but I asked her to hold over through the break, and we talked to her. Well, there's a story here today that this has been going on throughout the media, throughout the summer. This is so obviously gotcha. This is a coordinated plan. It's been planned and coordinated for months, and now we are in the execution phase of it, and it's being made to look like all of these women coming forward are random. But Avenatti produced this woman today because Ballsy Ford is bombing out, and Ramirez isn't going to go anywhere because Ramirez doesn't even want to testify. That's the second woman. She doesn't even want to testify before the committee. Ballsy Ford, I don't think ever was, and I still don't. They wanted to force Kavanaugh out simply with the allegations. They wanted Kavanaugh to conclude it'd be impossible to go on. They wanted Trump to conclude it'd be impossible to go on. That's what they were trying to do. Kavanaugh refused to go away, so here comes Julie Swetnick. After Kavanaugh, Avenatti telegraphs that it's coming earlier this week, a couple days ago, Monday. And what we're being led to believe is that Swetnick is so frustrated she doesn't want to come forward. This is so Ballsy Ford's being mistreated, and Ramirez is being mistreated, and women are being mistreated, and women are not being believed, and I've got no choice but to come forward and tell about the rape train stories. This has the potential to backfire. And I said that earlier this week at the Democrat Party like you cannot believe. Okay, let me take a brief time out. I promise when we come back, I know you're itching out there. I know you're dying to get on. I know you want to tell everybody what you think about this. So we will start. Oh, one more thing before the break. See, I go through the stack. I'm ready to go to a break, and I turn what I just used and put it at the bottom of the stack, and I see what's next up. Oh, yeah, I remember. Headline, surprise, Democratic operative admits derailing Kavanaugh is really about saving the Supreme Court from Trump. Guy Benson at Town Hall has the story. It's about Brian Fallon, former top spokesman for Hillary. This is it's not news. I mean, anybody that's paying attention to this for years knows that this is a scam that the Democrats are running, and it's one that they have run many times before. Nothing new in this other than the depths to which they are sinking. But it's a strategy, and Brian Fallon has admitted it in an interview with the New York Times. He admits what the Kavanaugh Destruction Project is. It's part of a high-stakes, two-step strategy to thwart Donald Trump. via a former aide to Mitch McConnell. Former aide to McConnell is confirming that that's all this is. Stop Trump, stop Kavanaugh. Stop conservatives. Okay, now the break, and your calls are coming up. Swetnick, by the way, claims that she was at these rape train parties 10 times. She partied with the group 10 times, and she also was gang raped. Believes that she was given Quaaludes or something similar placed in what she was drinking. Now, she was there, partied it up with this group that was doing this 10 times. After partying with the group 10 times, she was gang raped. Why would you hang around through 10 or 9 rape train parties? Why would you drink anything when you know that that is the vehicle for, if any of this is true, why would you consume whatever beverage these evil guys handed you? If bowl of punch, why would you drink? If you knew after going to 10 parties, then you have it happen to you? And still no names of the gang rapists other than Kavanaugh and Judge. If this happened in my high school, well, no, not everybody. The nerds wouldn't know about it. Nobody would talk to the nerds and tell them. But everybody at the thing would be talking about it, be passing notes back and forth. Hell yes. Everybody would know. The guys at these would be bragging through their teeth about these parts. Everybody would know. The bookworms wouldn't know. Nobody'd waste their time telling them, wouldn't want them showing up. Well, you asked. Ed in Orange County, California, welcome. It's great to have you on the EIB network. Hi.
Hello, Russ. Thank you for allowing me to be on your show today.
You bet, sir.
A friend of mine put it best. The Democrats have jumped the shark. Or as I like to say, the Democrats have started their Tet offensive. When I was in high school, a young lady was involved in a horrible situation like the one described in today's affidavit by the porn lawyer. Within days, the whole school and a neighboring school knew the story. The police were involved. Families were mad. My football team had a special meeting asking for details. The school talked about it all year. According to today's affidavit, she attended many parties like this, as you mentioned. Does anyone really believe that 6 FBI background investigations would not have heard of one party like this?
Well, that's what I asked. How does all of this escape anybody else knowing about it? Parents? Teachers? Other students who disapprove of it? When I was in junior high, so just to try to relate something here, maybe the most crazy thing I can remember that I didn't do in junior high school, principal called an assembly toward the end of the day, and nobody knew what for. And it was an attempted lecture on the dangers of indiscriminate sex. We're junior high school students. Now, that was middle school. I think we were 8th or 9th grade, whatever it was. And when the principal it was graphic, folks. Okay, again, I got to do the countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you have your young children with you, you don't have to explain certain terms here, then please. But I've got to tell this because it's got a point to it. This is almost if you've got rape trains going on in your high school, everybody in the world would know about it, and everybody would be talking about it. So this principal, you ready? 5, 4, got 3 seconds here to turn it off. For 30 seconds is all it's going to be. 3, 2, 1. Ready? When the principal began to explain blue balls, the student body started snickering at each other, looking around. He had the wrong definition for it. It was embarrassing. But point is, we all went home and told our parents. And just that. We all went home and told our parents what had happened, not not because we were tattling on it was just it was outrageous. It was unreal. It was toward the end of the day, an assembly for no reason, and a guy standing up there and going through all of the horrors that can happen to you, and blue balls was one of the things that happened to you and he was wrong about it, but the parents were outraged, and this guy didn't last the week. He did not last the week. I'm just saying that if rape trains have been going, that's not the kind of thing that never leaks out. It's not the kind of thing that leaks out, period. Everybody knows about it. You think the Democrats have wanted to destroy Kavanaugh, not just in this nomination, but when he was nominated for the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and you think this would have come up long before today, but it hasn't. And again, there aren't enough specifics to corroborate any of this. They don't want to. Now, I've talked through another segment where I intended to go to the phones, and I did get one call in, but look at what it inspired. So thank you out there, Ed, in Orange County. So we'll take another break here at the bottom. There's still other news. There's things that have nothing to do with this that are happening out there, but there's still a lot of details about this that we want to try to get into before the program ends, and a great soundbite roster again today. So sit tight and discuss amongst yourselves during the break. We will continue in mere moments. 800-282-2882 if you want to take a stab at getting through on the phones. Let me ask you another question. Your Judge Brett Kavanaugh, you're sitting on the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, which is a big circuit. That's the granddaddy. That's the Mac Daddy. I'm the Mac Daddy of talk radio. The D.C. Circuit is the Mac Daddy of appellate courts. You're sitting there, and you've been confirmed, and there have been 6 FBI investigations of you, and so far, you have kept the rape train secret. Nobody has found out what you were doing on the rape trains. But now, Donald Trump calls and nominates you to the U.S. Supreme Court, and you're starting to think, okay, I know how the Democrats play. They're not going to want me on this court. They're going to do it. They can't refute my qualifications. I can run rings around them judicially, intellectually. But I remember what they did to Judge Thomas. I don't know how I'm going to keep the rape trains from him. I better not accept the nomination. Would you accept the nomination to the Supreme Court if you had a history of spiking punch with drugs and booze for the purposes of preparing women for rape trains minimum 10 times where you went to high school in Montgomery County, Maryland? Would you do it? You would? There is no, I'm going to say Snerdley's bobbing his head. You're just agreeing with me, I see. Yeah, there's no way. If you have this in your background, there's no way. By the way, could you even get confirmed to the D.C. Circuit if you had this? And why is it that only a porn star lawyer can find these people who have the evidence of the rape train? I'm sorry, there isn't any evidence. What's the good answer for it? Only a porn star. Well, that's porn star is Stormy Daniels. Stephanie Clifford, for those who think it's unbecoming to call her a porn star. Okay, pole dancer, lap dancer, I don't know. She's a porn star. Okay, thanks. Back to the phones. Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is Diane. Thank you for waiting. It's your turn.
Hi, Russ. Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, ma'am.
So I am a converted by my husband conservative, so I've been paying attention to this Kavanaugh business, listening, reading, and just looking at this woman's, the new accuser and her accusations. The first thing that popped into my head, which you may have already answered in your last segment, was if she's truly seeking justice, which is what we have to assume she would be doing, why wouldn't she have named the man who actually raped her or held her down or any of that, but possibly a couple of guys who were standing in line in maybe another room, if that's how that she described it all. And it just doesn't she see that this is just making such a mockery of women who actually have valid.
No, I don't. I'm convinced that there's not. That people give lip service to that aspect of this, but obviously that's not a factor, or none of this would be happening at all. If people were worried about the effect this is having on women who really, really have been abused and raped and mistreated, that's nothing but words. I don't think. It sounds good, and it makes you look like you're thoughtful and so forth, but I don't think that enters into anybody's minds on the Democrat side in this. That's out the window. Your question, however, she's at these rape train parties, and after the 10th one, it happens to her, but she only remembers the guy standing around. She only remembers the guy who spiked the punch, but she doesn't remember who did the nasty. Now, maybe because she scared, panicked, traumatized, drunk, drugged, or what have you. Dark. Could be any number of explanations for that. But you still do remember two other people. How do you do that? How do you so easily remember the two people that weren't actually doing that? They just were in the setup phase, like the grounds crew. You know, getting the playing field ready to go. Then they go to the dugout while the action happens. You remember those guys, but you don't remember the perp. That's a good question, Diane. Do you have an answer yourself for it? Can you put yourself in her shoes? And how would that be?
Well, other than stating the obvious, that it seems to be a possible witch hunt and that she's just being used. Like you said, you had a caller yesterday who they've been looking for people to do this all summer, so she just happens to be somebody willing to step up and put herself out there. But it to me, it's just it's unbelievable because she is a woman, and if she had a valid complaint, you would think she would have come forward long before this.
Well, she had to wait to make sure her coming forward made a difference, mattered.
Right.
It had to be after everything else had bombed out. You have an interesting pedigree. You said you were a relatively new conservative. You used to be a liberal. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. How long ago was it that your transmogrification occurred?
Well, it wasn't that recent. When I started dating my husband, he listened to you daily. We probably still have boxes of cassette tapes of your show in our garage somewhere.
You need to send those to Legacy Box. You need to save those. You can't listen. Can you still listen to those? You still have cassette player?
Oh, sure. We have cassette players.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, well, the reason I'm asking is because as a former liberal, I mean, that's what you were born as. And so you probably still have certain things that tug at the suppressed or defeated, overcome liberalism within your being. Does this tempt you to go back to liberalism? Does this sour you on conservatism or conservatives, that it's only, not only, but these are the guys being accused other than Weinstein and the Hollywood people? Does it worry you, or do you think it's all bogus?
Oh, it doesn't worry me in the least bit. It only gives me a stronger conviction of what the Democratic Party is capable of. And the sad thing is, Rush, that they would, I have very good friends, family members, very liberal, very snowflakish, and you can't say a word around them. But the problem is they don't actually listen. So the way that I was able to actually continue dating my husband was I started listening to your program, because if I didn't, I had no ammunition to, fight back with. So, but, strangely enough, the transformation happened after I started listening, because you start realizing that you're missing out on a big portion of the story of what's actually happening. And so, no, not at all. It does just the opposite to me. So,
good. I'm glad to hear that. Because as a transmogrified conservative, you could always, the temptation to, I have a theory. It's actually not mine. It's John O'Sullivan, who was an aide to Margaret Thatcher, editor at National Review. It's called the Sullivan Law, Theorem, Doctrine, whatever. And it basically says that any person or group that is not actively daily conservative will become liberal. Because it's the most gutless choice you can make. It doesn't take any intellectual commitment at all. All you have to do is feel. Conservatism is even though it's just flat out nothing more than common sense, given the pop culture dominance of liberalism, conservatism is a fight. It's an active daily pursuit. And the fact that you're able to hold on to your conservatism in the midst of all this is heartening to me.
Well, it shouldn't be that difficult, actually. It's like you say, it's common sense, and the information's out there for everyone. But it's probably easier to be liberal and just to feel good about everything that's going on and that you want to do. But
now wait, see that's very. They don't. They feel. It's easy to be a liberal because you look at suffering and oh my God, I hate that. That makes you a good person. Doesn't take much to be a good person in liberalism. All you have to do is suffer. See suffering and suffer. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to solve it. You don't have to do anything but find out somebody to blame for it. And it makes you a good person. But I didn't say you're happy. They're not happy. There isn't a one of them that's happy. They don't even laugh. They are in constant state of rage or anger. As discussed yesterday, liberalism is really, it's encroached on our politics, but it's a psychological disorder. And they have various psychological maladies and disorders which they have entered the political process in an attempt to get even, fix, punish whoever's responsible for what's ever happened to people. And in that sense, I just saw Jeff Flake speaking from the floor of the Senate, talking about how our politics has just become so debased. Our politics is so low, and we've got to stop it. Well, this isn't going to stop the debasement of our politics. The debasement of our system is not going to stop until the psychological disorders that are liberalism are kept out of politics and solved and fixed and addressed somewhere else. But as long as psychological disorders become embraced by the Democrat Party with promises of government solutions, the reason they're never happy is because they never get any of these problems solved. They never get anything fixed. And when they do get what they want, it's never enough. So as long as and I'm being literal here. It was a theory Jim Garrity had at National Review that I happen to, I understand it and I agree with it. As long as psychological disorders become evidence of political bias, discrimination, and unfairness, we don't have any hope. When the political system is blamed for and then responsible for addressing and fixing what are psychological disorders, there's no hope. That's not what politics is, but it is what has become. And that is why, decent or normal people, I think most people know what decency and normalcy is versus indecency and abnormal. But as long as the indecent and abnormal can overwhelm the system with their disorders and demand that the purpose of government and politics is to address these disorders. Remember, these disorders result from these people are victims because somebody's done something to them. Somebody was mean to them, mistreated them, or whatever. The political system has to fix that. That can't happen. We've been trying. We've had the Great Society. We've had, you name it. We've had government programs to address every freaking liberal problem there is. And all they've done is become more widespread. They've not become fixed or repaired because it can't be done. And so liberalism now proceeds on the basis that there are people responsible for the unhappiness, the misery, the inequality, the injustice that the psychologically disordered are feeling. And that happens to be us, folks. We conservatives, Christians, we are largely responsible for the unhappiness and misery because of racist, sexism, bigotry. You know the drill. And so we have to be erased. We have to be eliminated because we're mean-spirited and all that. And the political system then has to accommodate. And since the political system can't fix any of these disorders, they have to be treated or accommodated, which usually is money and punishment aimed at people who are said to be responsible for the unhappiness. So that's how you get Black Lives Matter hating cops. That's how you get militant activists on the left hating religion. And any of the other institutions that have defined America and its greatness. It's why the Constitution is not safe. I believe the Constitution has in it inbred unfairness and discrimination and so forth. So pretty much sums it up. But you wouldn't even find a lot of agreement with the principles I've just laid, the concepts, but I think they're undeniable. At any rate, we take a break again, and we'll come back with more after this. So Qualcomm says that Apple stole its technology and its modems and gave the secrets to Intel. Intel is the exclusive supplier of modems for both Wi-Fi and cellular connection on the iPhone XR, XS, and XS, or XS and XS Max. And Qualcomm, who's in the middle of a lawsuit with Apple already, has said that Apple stole its modem secrets and gave them to Intel. So I guess that means Apple's guilty. Qualcomm has made the allegation. Apple much bigger than Qualcomm. So in our current climate, if Qualcomm says it, since the media doesn't like Apple to begin with, Apple is guilty. That's what's happening, essentially. Even Senate confirmation hearings are not even trials, and they are still bastardizing the rule of law with all of this. Here's Michael in Brooklyn. I'm glad you waited. You're next here on the Rush Limbaugh program. Hi.
Hello, Rush. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
No one in your audience should be surprised or shocked at what the Democrats are doing. They telegraphed who they were in 91. They nearly destroyed a man, and that was just a black conservative replacing a black liberal. This confirmation was the most important confirmation in our lifetimes, tipping the court. So what did the GOP do? They put Elmer Fudd at the chair. Republicans can't go before cameras and tell us how flimsy, including Mitch McConnell, how flimsy Blasey Ford's story is, without at the same time telegraphing how incompetent Grassley was. You can't have it both ways. The Dems come to fight. They come to battle. Republicans want to be statesmen, and they don't know how to fight. And I'll ask you one question.
Yeah.
If Grassley was bribed to sabotage Kavanaugh's confirmation, how would it look any different than it looks now? Please answer me. Somebody. What needs to happen is there needs to be, out of this, hopefully like a phoenix.
Okay, give me.
We need a national conservative party. The GOP is gone. Conservative. I mean, I'm from New York, so we have a separate conservative party.
We don't have that now. Look, that's an argument for another day. That doesn't get Kavanaugh in the court. Now I'm out of time. I can't. But I have a question for you that I will ask and answer when we get back. So Trump has tweeted about Avenatti. He said that Avenatti is a third-rate lawyer who is good at making false accusations. Okay, folks, fastest 3 hours in media with a brief timeout and a quick resumption. So hang on. Be right back. Guess what? Elmer Fudd has just opened up the possibility of another hearing to handle this babe that's come forward today. I say Elmer Fudd because our caller from Brooklyn referred to Senator Grassley as Elmer Fudd. Headline is, it's a Washington Times. Grassley opens door to second hearing after third Kavanaugh accuser surfaces. Now, what the caller from Brooklyn meant was, in the game of optics, there's no way the Republicans win this, right? That's what he meant. You've got Grassley, take your pick of any of them. Jeff Flake is now saying he's getting death threats. And no matter how this ends, there's going to be a cloud over everybody when it's over, no matter how the vote goes. People are now starting to dig into Julie Swetnick. Well, they're digging into her story. Have to be really careful here. Welcome back, folks. 800-282-2882 if you want to appear on the program. Michael Avenatti's client, Julie Swetnick, who says she was at 10 of these rape-train parties, and that she herself was a victim of rape after the 10th party or some such thing. It was, I mean, she kept going to these. She's 55 years old. That makes her 18 to 19 years old from 1981 to 1982. So she is admitting to being, you're 18 into 19. You're no longer in high school unless they've kept you back a year. I don't think that's the case here. So she's admitting semi-adulthood status at 10 parties where minors were drinking adult beverages and being gang raped, but she didn't tell anybody. Swetnick graduated high school in 1980. We put that in italicized bold font. Julie Swetnick graduated high school in 1980. So in 1982, as a college student, she was attending high school parties where druggings and gang rapes occurred, seemingly with regularity. And she went back to those parties 10 times. And she's just now reporting this 37 years later, 1 year later than Christine Ballsy Ford story took place. Now, if these drug and rape train parties happened as Julie Swetnick says, there would have been dozens of witnesses. Potential DNA. I don't know what forensics then was. I mean, we didn't have crime scene investigation shows back then. But it might be possible. Records of this behavior from classmates and homeowners. I mean, the fact that this is only now coming to light after at minimum 10 of these parties and nobody's ever said a word about any of this until today. If there were rape rings, I mean, rape, let me tell you something, folks. I was in Kansas City in the 1970s and, well, from 1975 to 84, so 10 years. And that was a really, really formative time for the modern era of feminism. Within that 10-year period is when Susan Brown Miller wrote the famous defining book on rape, claiming that it was not a sexual crime, but rather it was a power play. And back in that era, women, young women who had signed on to feminism swore by it. And rape was, well, it's always been a horrible thing, but it was really on everybody's consciousness back in the mid-70s into the mid-80s. Now, not to say that it was any more special then versus now. It's just that if you plug in the formative years of modern-day feminism back then, which was the case, it had a humongous political tack to it as well, meaning people were on the lookout for rape. Rape was, back then I remember men were being accused of it falsely. sometimes accurately, but it was a rising. Now, this was Kansas City. It's the middle of the country, and I assume if it was happening there, it would be even more so on popular cultural coasts. And the idea, my point is the idea that here you have in a high school in Maryland, out-of-control rape trains, when the feminism of that era, which had captured many young women in high school, they eagerly signed on to it. It was new and exciting, and it was defining, it was empowering for women, and being sensitive to and aware of and stopping rape was at a zenith because of the political attachment. And in that atmosphere, at that time frame, at that historical moment, the idea that rape trains at high school parties were happening and such that nobody ever reported one, said anything about it, that none of the victims ever came forward and claimed it had happened, and none of the perps ever were apprehended and punished. It just doesn't jibe. Why would a person continue to go to parties like this? Why would you keep going to these things, particularly if you had any fear that you were going to be one of the victims at some point? Why would you keep going? And then after why not tell somebody and stop it? And by the way, she's not in high school herself when this is happening. She graduated high school in 1980. We're talking about events that happened in 1981, 1980, 82. This would be a scandal without a Supreme Court nomination attached to it. This would be a full-fledged what? Scandal that nobody heard about, much less investigated or prosecuted back when it happened. Here's another thing. Remember, we had to call Jenny from Wyoming yesterday. She told us that she was getting calls from media people throughout the summer because it had been learned that she attended a residential college at Yale at the same time Kavanaugh was there. She was at the same residential college. So she and other people had been tracked down by the media, and all summer long, the drive-bys were calling anybody and everybody that they thought might have known Kavanaugh to try to dig up some dirt on the guy, because the drive-by's been working with the Democrats to destroy every Republican nominee in your lifetime and mine. How come it is, with the drive-bys scouring the earth, scorched earth policy, just in the past 3 or 4 months, talking to all of these people who went to school with Kavanaugh, why did this never come up? This, if there's anything to this one, why wasn't this first? Why was Christine Ballsy Ford first? Because all of these three are part of a structured Democrat plan. We have that from none other than Brian Fallon, former top spokesman for Hillary Clinton's failed presidential campaign. He's a confidant to Senator Schumer, ex-senior official at Eric Holder's Department of Justice. He's now the public face of a left-wing group devoted to defeating Trump's presidential and judicial nominees. The most urgent priority being doing whatever's necessary to prevent Republicans from filling the current Supreme Court vacancy. In an interview with the New York Times, Brian Fallon unambiguously admits what the Kavanaugh destruction project is. It's part of a high-stakes two-step strategy to thwart Trump via a former aide to Mitch McConnell. Senate Democrat operative admits derailing Kavanaugh is really about saving the Supreme Court from Trump. It's making sure that Trump doesn't get to confirm any of his nominees to the Supreme Court. Pull quote from the story. It's downright frightening that multiple United States senators who have supposedly been specifically chosen to sit on this influential committee because of their legal acumen are saying that a man accused of sexual misconduct more than 35 years ago with no first-hand corroboration is responsible for disproving it. How can this happen? It's frightening that multiple senators, not just Democrats, Republicans too, who are on this committee because their legal acumen can sit there and claim that an out-of-the-blue allegation 35 years ago has to be disproven by the accused. These senators would never, ever accept any such thing for themselves, for anyone they love, or for a political ally. But so long as this frankly un-American demand that flies in the face of centuries of Western jurisprudence and the bedrock presumption of innocence, since it's useful to achieve the Democrat dream articulated so candidly by Brian Fallon, they're going with it. It's disgraceful. It really does seem like some of these bad actors do not care one whit about even feigning interest in discerning the truth. It all just means to a desired partisan ends, wherein principles and individuals can be embraced and discarded as necessary. That's the part of this that just I'm having a tough time with. The open, wanton, entire destruction of a great and patriotic American life seems to bother none of these people. I mean, I don't even hear too many Republicans talking about this from that angle. It's a political fight. We want to get Trump's nominee confirmed, or maybe we don't, but we want to get a Republican on the court, blah, 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 blah. But nobody's talking about what's happening here. Christine Ford's life is not being destroyed. She's going to be a star and a heroine for the Democrat Party for the rest of her life, like Anita Hill is. And Brett Kavanaugh hasn't done anything to anybody, and the wanton, open ruination of his life and his family and his career doesn't seem to faze anybody involved in this. It's just mind-boggling. This is a man of superior intellect and achievement. Within the confines of what this is about, having somebody really good and qualified on the Supreme Court, that seems to be the last thing in the list of considerations here. So with a number of Republican and Democrat senators still undecided on the nomination and with highly anticipated testimony slated for tomorrow, Mitch McConnell should make sure that every one of his members reads this New York Times piece where Brian Fallon of the Clinton campaign admits that this is an open, structured, strategic campaign to keep every Trump nominee off the Supreme Court. Every damn one of these Republicans they ought to not have to read this to know that. They ought not have to read this to know what the Democrat Party's all about. Guy Benson says here that McConnell also should make sure that they're all aware of the cynically shifting standards being adopted by the left in a transparent effort to turn any good faith move Republicans make into a lose-lose proposition. So much of this stuff is basic. The Republicans ought not have to read a newspaper story where a Clintonista admits what the Democrats are doing in order to understand what the Democrats are doing. Again, in this New York Times story, Brian Fallon, the Clintonista, admits without any doubt, with great happiness and confidence, that the Kavanaugh destruction project is part and parcel of keeping any Trump nominee off the Supreme Court. Anyway, that's where we are now with Grassley suggesting that the Senate could be open to a second hearing after the Swetnick allegations have been made. That's playing right into the Democrats' hand. Another hearing is another delay, which, I mean, at the bare minimum, that's what this is. At the bare minimum, it's a delay. At the abject worst, it's about the political murder of Brett Kavanaugh. Quick time out. Back after this. Don't go away. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on the bright side, and there is a bright side to this, we may have reached a tipping point. I have thought so on several occasions over the years, but this may be a tipping point. This may be one of those incidents where the vast majority of the American population, and I still believe that a majority of Americans are what I would classify as decent people. I don't believe the majority of our country is plagued by massive psychological disorders that have led to a deranged political activism. I don't think that's the majority of our country. I think it's silent, shows up and elects Trump now and then. People, things like that happen. I think they're livid. I think they're outraged over this. I think the outrage originally was going to be at Republicans for caving to all this, but now we're past that. Because one of the things I believe is truly happening, I think fence sitters and casual news consumers, people that are not ideologically involved like you and I are, people who are not so-called news junkies, I think they're watching this and I think they're just getting livid. I think they're angry as they can be at this. Because this episode has obvious unfairness. It has obvious indecency to it. It is obviously so outside the bounds of what our normal politics are that people can't escape this. In the process, the drive-by media is embarrassing itself. And it began that in earnest with their coverage, one-sided anti-Trump. But you add all of these things to the Mueller investigation, all of this time Trump colluded with Russia, but no, there's no evidence. Every allegation the Democrat Party has made about political enemies for the last 2 years has had zero come to it. Nothing has come of it. The Russians didn't cheat, didn't help Trump. Trump didn't cheat with the Russians. There isn't any evidence of it. Now, sure, the psychologically deranged left believes it, but I'm not talking about them. I still believe they are a minority. I think this episode, and particularly today, with now the rape train story, first time in 35 years, nobody's ever heard about this. We're going to bring a confirmation process to another screeching halt over an allegation that, like every allegation the Democrats and the media have made for 2 years, has nothing to it. Think about all of the stories since Trump won the election, just since then, with all of these anonymous deep state sources in the intelligence community, the law enforcement community, pretty much promising that evidence linking Trump and collusion with the Russians was immediately forthcoming, and none has been. And slowly and surely, people are learning about the collusion within the FBI. And they're learning about the collusion of the FBI leadership with Hillary Clinton. This is to casual observers, it may hit them as a slow drip. And we've gotten to the point where one too many slow drips is finally causing the faucet to be unleashed. Because this is so far outside the bounds of what even our degraded politics has come to be in terms of normal. This is so even beyond that. This is so plain, flat out indecent that these people can kiss their blue wave goodbye. I really do. I think that there is a simmering rage. Some of it might be at Republicans, but there is a simmering rage at Washington itself. And the Democrats are the focus of that rage. Every charge they make has nothing to it. They're destroying people in the process. You wait and see if this doesn't manifest itself somehow. Folks, I've been trying to catch a little bit of cable news other than the Fox news channel, and I haven't yet found. Now, I haven't had a chance to watch it. I'm going to catch it in a minute snippet here, a couple minutes max there. So I haven't seen nearly all of it. I couldn't stomach much of it. But I just have to observe, I haven't seen one person being interviewed as a guest or a panelist or analyst on CNN that has the slightest doubt about this rape story. Not one. Now, they may have had people, I'm sure they've got their random conservative that they've dredged up that's been on CNN sometime during the day. I haven't seen it. The ones I've had a chance to see, and again, not scientific, not one person with any doubt about this. Now, I think that is another really illustrative sign of the divide or the divisions in this country. I don't know how you cannot have some doubt about this rape train thing if you just stop and think about it for 5 minutes. And I don't know how you have no doubt about Ballsy Ford and this, but they don't. They've zero. Zilch, zero, nada. I haven't found anybody, particularly news media people, anchors, anchorettes, infobabes, reporters. I haven't found anybody with any doubt. What I've heard is attempts to make the Swetnick affidavit seem solid as the Bible. And I just don't know how you do that. How does a critical thinking, open-minded, curious person not have even a smidgen of doubt about these allegations? At any rate, Dave in Pittsburgh, it's great to have you on the EIB network. Hello.
Hi, Rush.
Hey.
I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 20 years, went to law school and everything, but I'm starting to have serious doubts about my own qualifications as an attorney because apparently I missed a very important class in law school.
What class is that you missed?
Well, apparently there must have been a class where the credibility of a witness depends solely upon that person's female genitalia. They must be believed. Evidence, proof doesn't matter. Presumption of innocence doesn't matter. Maybe it was evidence class or procedure class, jurisprudence class. I don't know. I must have missed that. So apparently that's the rule. Maybe I should just, in all good conscience, step down, recuse myself from the practice of law like Jeff Sessions. Just recuse myself from the practice of law. I had no idea that was the rule. Here I am practicing law for 20 years, and I guess that's the rule.
So you didn't know that when a woman alleges sexual misconduct that she cannot be challenged or disbelieved. You didn't know that. You weren't taught that.
Well, I was taught presumption of innocence. Witnesses must...
Well, that's out the window. When politics is... There's no such thing. Even Schumer's out there saying that the Democrats are now in unison saying that the burden of proof here is on Kavanaugh because this is a nomination to the Supreme Court. If somebody's going to allege that he has sex with turtles, he's got to prove he didn't do it. We can't have anybody in a court that likes to have sex with turtles. They can allege anything, and it's up to him to disprove it.
And they're right. I don't know how to practice law. Everything I learned was wrong. Maybe I'm questioning. I should step down. Because I thought it was about presumption of innocence, the Constitution, right to confront your accuser. That's another thing, which is wrong.
Oh, no. Ballsy Ford demanded that Kavanaugh go first, and her first demand before she would show up. She was going to deny Kavanaugh the right to face his accuser. Dave, I know you're being facetious. And it's funny. I know that's the way you're making the point, and I applaud it. I'm glad you called. I was just watching while talking to Dave there. Lindsey Grahamnesty was speaking before microphones. Fox News had it. Don't know what he said, but it reminded me. I have been paying attention. Mr. Snerdley, tell me if you agree with this or not. Don't misunderstand me here, folks. I'm just giving you timeline reference points. Since Senator McCain passed away, Senator Graham seems to have become a different guy on a lot of things. Senator Graham seems to become a more reliable conservative, like this issue and some other things that have popped up out there. He's taking the lead on things, and he's become one of the biggest and most effective defenders of Trump in the United States Senate. I mean, go figure. This is since Senator McCain passed away. We got to take another brief, obscene profit break. We do it and be right back. So I have a note here from one of the finest legal minds that I know. That would be mine. I wrote myself a note so I wouldn't forget the question. Question is, because they're telling us here that now they've got 3 witnesses. They wouldn't all be lying. We have Ballsy Ford, we have Ramirez, and now we have Swetnick. And the drive-bys and the advocates that are against Kavanaugh are saying, well, they wouldn't lie. They must be telling the truth. There's no way 3 different people would lie about the same thing. Okay. Well, Donald Trump said there was no collusion between him, his campaign, and Russia. Carter Page said that there was no collusion between him and his work and his business and the Russians. And Paul Manafort said that there was no collusion. He has no knowledge of any collusion between the Russians and Trump, and he didn't do any. So we got 3 people there who all day long say that there was no collusion.